Welcome to the Warehouse. Have you ever heard a sermon and thought, how in the world did he discover that? Or where did he get that idea? Every week at Cornerstone Church, two teams dig into the biblical text that'll be taught during our weekend services. We spend hours talking about the text, the context, the culture of the time, you name it. But you can't stuff all that into a 30-minute message. That's where we come in. We're going to show you the stuff in the warehouse that didn't make it to the stage. Hey, Nathan.
Yeah.
How would you describe your mother-in-law's cooking?
You know, I feel like this is a little bit of a minefield to go into, right? You know what? I would say probably like South American. That's how I describe most of the food that I've had over there. So my in-laws spent several years in Peru as missionaries. And so like often whenever I would go over there while I was dating Tia, like they would fix some kind of Peruvian dish.
Ooh.
Let's see. I'm trying to remember what like salchipapas was like French fries and hot dogs.
Yeah.
And
that's Peruvian?
It was Peruvian.
I've been eating Peruvian my whole life.
It was like a stir-fried dish. We did that. They cooked a lot with ají powder. That is actually quite delicious. I like spicy food.
Mm-hmm.
And so like they would make, I don't remember what it's called, like chicken ají or something like that. And It would be like a creamy chicken dish with this like red or yellow powder on top that was a spice. And I really liked it.
Man.
But I would always add more seasoning to it because I like, lots of spice.
Yeah. First time I had ceviche was at a Peruvian place in St. Louis.
I've
That's
never
not
had
there
ceviche.
anymore.
Oh, it's good.
Yeah, real good. Stephanie, how would you describe your mother-in-law's cooking?
Cooked.
Awesome. We're going to be in Matthew.
What about you?
5,
You don't escape
verses
this.
13.
You
Yeah,
can't shove
your
us
turn.
out into the minefield
True.
and stand on the
Parker,
side.
could you please mute their mics? No. Okay, one story. We're all together. My mother-in-law cooks, and my wife's sister, Sarah, will say, Mom, this is great. We're in Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 to 20 today. We're going to be talking about being salt and light.
Hey.
It may have been why I asked that question today. There's a tendency to need the salt shaker when I'm around family members who are not my immediate family members.
Mm-hmm. That's a standard conversation at my house. Like Tia loves very bland food.
Interesting, because she's not a bland person.
She's not a bland person. She's a spicy person. I'm not sure anybody would actually describe my wife that way.
Ají Tia.
Ají Tia. Yeah. But but she likes bland food. So just like plain rice.
Plain
rice.
No
or just,
butter or sugar?
Yeah, just rice. Wait.
Sugar.
Wait.
You don't put butter and sugar in your white rice?
No.
Oh, we put soy sauce in your white rice.
What?
Yeah. Okay. Anyway.
Yeah. My goal when I put a plate in front of people that I've cooked for is for them to not have to touch anything but their fork.
Mm.
Yeah. It's like, like whenever someone sets out steak sauce with a steak or whatever, you're like, ooh.
Yeah, it hurts.
It hurts.
And sometimes I think when Rachel's mad at me, she grabs it. She knows it doesn't need it, but she grabs it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's passive aggressive for sure.
But then she hits me with it, so it's aggressive.
Oh, it's active aggressive. Guys, that's not true.
She has never
Harmed you.
She's probably thought about hitting me, if we're honest. You guys have.
We all
Anyway, we're right at the start, week number 2 of a series that's going to take us through the summer. Talking about the greatest.
Best.
Not the greatest.
No, it's the best.
I mean, it's probably both.
Probably best and the greatest sermon ever preached.
Yep.
Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. Almost said mouth.
Mouth.
The Sermon on the Mount.
Yep.
Found in Matthew chapter 5 and following through 7.
Yep.
5 through 7?
Yep.
So here we go. Matthew 5. Last week we were in the first 12 verses. This week we're going to be looking at Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 to 20. Stephanie, what was your big idea?
We are called to preserve righteousness, to be a light in a dark world, because Jesus is the fulfillment.
Not shabby.
Mhm.
I said, oh, right as my computer went dark on me. There we go. Jesus fulfilled the law so that our righteousness could exceed the scribes and Pharisees.
Nice. Mine was Jesus followers stand out.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
Simple.
Parker had a, I didn't write Parker's down. Did you write Parker's down? I really love Parker's. You remember yours? It was fulfilled. Yeah, Jesus fulfilled so we would be on a hill. Yeah, and we'll get to that later too. I just kind of looked at him and I said, hey.
And the reverse of that's kind of true. Like Jesus went to the hill so we could fulfill.
Whoa.
Oh! Wow. It works both ways.
It works both ways.
Yeah.
Man, oh man. So context, we're in the same place as we were last week.
Yeah.
Matthew chapter 5.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want context, real good context, go back last week's. Parker's going to drop in right here the timestamps that you need to listen to.
Yeah, Jay, I will gladly add in some context for the listeners here. If you go back to 6 minutes and 30 seconds of the last episode 34, you will get some amazing context that Jay, Nathan, and Stephanie added in there.
Thanks, man. You're just the best.
Yeah.
So do we have any extra, or do we need to highlight anything of what Parker just replayed?
I think the only thing for me that I felt like was especially pertinent to bring back out was just, again, how Matthew is really focused on a Jewish audience, and these people were steeped in the law, in what Moses had written and what the prophets had written. And I think that gives a lot of foundational work for us talking about like what it meant, the salt of the earth and sitting on a hill, along with especially the law and prophets section.
That's so interesting to me, and it just made the light bulb go off. Matthew, the former tax collector, who was hated by his Jewish brothers and sisters, now wants to bring them the gospel to know, so that they can know that Jesus is the Messiah. That twist has just blown my mind as we're sitting here.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And in order for them to be, I mean, that's one of the amazing things is like the Old Testament, rightly understood, does lead you to believe in Jesus Christ. And so like, I think for Matthew, he's intentionally not trying to divorce Jesus from the Old Testament, but trying to show how much he is the fulfillment of it, because they've spent their entire lives, steeped in this culture, and rightly understood, it should lead them to gladly welcome Jesus as the Messiah.
Oh man, I wonder how many times where they accuse Jesus of being a friend of tax collectors and sinners, that Matthew was right there, and we'll never know. And Jesus just looking at him and kind of winking and say, "Yep."
He's like, I'm standing right here.
Another important part is that Matthew, throughout his gospel, shows that Jesus fulfills all that God has promised. And so particularly showing how Jesus was the ultimate son of both Abraham and David. So a lot of his language is him talking about how he is the fulfillment, which you were just kind of saying.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, he is the heir. Yeah. Boy, that's good.
Yep. That was it for me, though.
Any other contextual highlights?
No.
Yeah. And so here we are again, up on Mount Beatitude, like we talked about last week. Jesus had gone up, his disciples had come around, and the crowds had followed, and then Jesus starts talking.
Yeah, and so like in the last part of last week's passage, it switched from like, blessed are they, and then he says, blessed are you. So it seems to be maybe a change of audience, like who he's talking about, like not just talking about people in general or them, like third person, but switches to second person. And he says, blessed are you who are persecuted, which I think really sets up this week really well as the immediate context. Blessed are you when you're persecuted for my name's sake.
So as we think about this part in particular, and for the next bit when he's talking about you, we should maybe think about it as a switch from, he's not making a call to everybody who's out listening, but he's talking to the ones who've chosen to follow him.
Yeah. Yep.
Like his disciples?
Yep.
Now as he's talking to his disciples.
Yeah.
Yep. Just like Matthew says, and disciples came and he started talking to them. So Matthew 5:13-20. Let's go 13-16, and then we'll follow up with the second 4. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket,
No.
but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Are you going to hide it under a bushel?
No. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine.
Guys, I knew a song from
Hey, look at you,
Whoa.
Stephanie.
it's all because my husband, he sings it to our kids.
Aw,
Or did.
That's
Does.
sweet.
Still,
Does?
sometimes.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
sweet.
All right. You dads out there who still sing This Little Light of Mine, email us. I'm putting an email us into every episode.
I don't feel like anybody's going to do that.
No audio messages.
Maybe now
coming?
that I called it out, somebody will.
Send that audio message in.
Yeah.
Rob. Okay. What do you have? Verse 13.
Salt of the earth.
Salt. And again, so this is all cards on the table.
Mm-hmm.
I love her because she is my wife's mother. I need the salt shaker when I'm at my mother-in-law's.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cards on the table. So, all the way back in Leviticus 2, we see the importance of salt in what God's been talking to his people about. So Leviticus 2:13, you shall season all your grain offerings with salt. You shall not let the salt of the covenant with your God be missing from your grain offering. With all your offerings, you shall offer salt. And the people said,
Mm-hmm.
put that salt. So for them, most of their salt, almost all of their salt, would have come from the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is about, what did I say here? About 20 miles from Jerusalem. The thing I looked at said 33 kilometers, but God-fearing American, so I converted it to miles, 20.51 miles from Jerusalem to the Dead Sea. Now, this is cool. So the ratio of water to salt, so they call it salinity. The salinity of the Dead Sea is 34%. So it's 34% salt. The Great Salt Lake in Utah varies between 5 and 27%. The oceans of the earth have an average salinity of 3.5%. I remember every time I've gone, the Pacific, the Atlantic, the Gulf of Mexico, we're in the Caribbean. Anytime I'm in an ocean or a sea, a Gulf, get out and inevitably, I'm going to get salt in my mouth, salt water in my mouth. And it's just icky.
I kind of like it.
You would.
That's Ellie, my 5-year-old. Like I don't know. She's a very quiet crier. Like sometimes she'll just get upset about something and you have no idea. And then you just look over and there's just like tear stains all the way down her face and stuff.
No.
Yeah, it's sad. But also like she's just licking her tears all the time. And like it's been pretty frequently that she's told me like, I like the taste of tears.
I mean,
So
I would
water
have
is
a
icky.
salt lick if I could. Like, just to, like, you know.
You can.
Yeah,
Go,
Rural
I know
King.
like
the
Rural
deer.
King.
Yeah. Trust me.
Go get one.
I've debated
get
multiple
one.
times.
Yeah.
I do enjoy salt.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So remember how salty ocean water is, and then think the Dead Sea is 10 times as salty
Ooh.
as any ocean you've ever been in.
Yep.
So they had some salt.
Plenty of salt to go around.
Plenty.
So then a lot of people would float, right? Because
Oh,
it's
yeah.
extra salty.
Yeah.
Mm.
Super easy to float in the Dead Sea.
Would it be good for your skin?
I don't know. I would think so.
Yeah. We should do like salt rubs.
I would think so.
There's sugar scrubs.
Okay, so this and this salt of the earth is actually, I mean, it's still a phrase that's used to talk about people being good people, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's salt of the earth. That's just somebody saying that he's like his moral fiber is really high, or like that he's, he's a good person. So there's different ways this phrase has been interpreted. I've heard plenty of sermons on this, and this was a pretty fun discussion about like what's the right way to interpret this.
Yeah.
What are some of the ways that it's been interpreted?
So this is how I got my big idea, is because how I was taught, how I've always studied it is that salt was used as a preservative. And so since they didn't own a deep freezer, refrigerators, people would use salt to preserve many things like food and meats and stuff. And so that's where I got that Christians, like we are called to preserve his righteousness. And then another way it's been interpreted is like preserving the Bible, preserving Jesus, preserving like that type of thing. But the way we got to discuss it yesterday, I really enjoyed it, which I know we'll get to here in a little bit. But I also have read it as purity because of the whiteness. And then also it came back to how they would use it for covenant. In the Old Testament, it had covenant language. And whenever they would do animal sacrifices, they would put it on the animals and then sacrifice. So, yeah.
God's like, don't be bringing none of that bland food in here.
Yeah. It doesn't want the offerings to him to be bland.
Yeah.
That's so good. But if salt has lost its taste,
Yeah.
this was a fun conversation too.
It was, and it took me a minute yesterday to process it because I was like, no. Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so I sat in it for a minute and processed quietly.
What did she process?
Because, okay, so it is true to say these things about salt, right?
Yeah.
It does preserve things like that. That's true. It's a fact of history that people have used salt to cure things and to make it, last for longer.
Or more medicinally.
Yeah. And so like that's not wrong. And so but if we're not careful, we can read meanings into it that like they might not have heard and understood. And that's like in seminary, we're talking about it. It's a reader response hermeneutic. So it's like the way I hear it determines the meaning versus like what the text means or what the author meant. Yeah. So anyway,
so we landed in a specific place where we thought the disciples would have heard it as Jesus was talking.
yeah, which was specifically like its most simple form, which is if salt has lost its taste, like just as a seasoning.
Yeah.
Which is like not as a preservative, not as symbolizing purity, but just as a seasoning for their food.
Yeah. But there's a catch.
Yeah.
Because salt doesn't have a shelf life.
Right.
Yeah. Salt, it's impossible for salt itself to lose its saltiness.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of the few food, most other spices, if you leave your oregano in the cabinet, it goes bad. Yeah. It's going to like stop tasting as good and just become very bland over time. But salt does not do that. Now, iodized salt does, but that's because of the iodization process.
Yeah.
But like salt in its pure form does not go bad.
Yeah.
So whenever we hit that, like if it loses its taste, there's kind of Jay and I both ran across an article that was like laying out some different possibilities with here.
I love what the first one is about. I just love his idea. Yeah, he says, so there are three possibilities for determining a meaning of this text. The first, Jesus wasn't a chemist. And so the idea, Jesus didn't know that salt couldn't lose its taste. Mm-hmm. I don't know about that. Mm-hmm. I think Jesus probably did know. Mm-hmm. But also, and this was one that really, really caught my attention and captured my imagination. So it's impossible for salt to lose its taste. And that impossibility was the point that Jesus is talking about. Mm-hmm. That was really interesting to me. And the most common is the third. Is that what would have been called salt in that era was impure, containing a wide array of other compounds. Of the substances, sorry about that, in this mix, it was the most soluble in water. Mm-hmm. So if exposed to moisture, the salt itself would disappear, would dissipate. And what would be left are the impurities, the other compounds that are in there. Yeah.
So you've got a pile of salt somewhere, it gets rained on or whatever, you go to put it on your food and it just has no taste because it's
graphite.
Impurities.
It's
chalky calcium stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is an interesting possibility as well. Yeah.
Either way, did one resonate for you?
You know,
Jesus wasn't a chemist.
Yeah, exactly. No, to me, so I think, that my gut is that using this term salt of the earth might have actually been a common saying in a way that they talked about themselves as Jews.
That the Jewish nation.
Because of like throughout the New Testament, or I'm sorry, throughout the Old Testament, there's like this phrasing of a covenant of salt. And salt had to do, like, was largely tied to that covenant. God's ability to keep his promise. So with that, with them being salt of the earth, and I think that way partially because they also talked of themselves as a city on a hill. So whenever you start paralleling these two, it seems to me that he is setting up something that's like a logical impossibility, but saying that it is what's happened. So salt, if it somehow had an ability to lose its saltiness, it would be worthless and pointless. Like it's not even salt at that point.
And so you would think he's getting to the point of saying that the Pharisees and Sadducees have led the people to lose their saltiness.
Yeah. I think that's what's going on. Yeah.
You're going to say something?
I was just going to read Parker's quote that he found for us yesterday, but it's similar to what you've been saying. What? Oh, I thought you already said it. And I was like, dang it. I did it again. Jesus' teaching can be taken to mean, in part, that certain qualities are as, can't read this word. Innate? Innate?
Yeah, innate.
It is innate. You're welcome for that long delay.
Start over.
No, to a born-again believer, as saltiness is to salt, the idea of losing those properties is unthinkable. In a more practical sense, the salt which people use daily was not chemically pure. It could be diluted or even contaminated. That would result in something that was supposed to be salt, but didn't taste or act like salt anymore. That made it useless and a subject to disposal.
So that's leaning into the impurity.
That third thing that we talked about, yeah.
And again, so that would have less to do with the salt itself losing saltiness and more to do with impurity being introduced into it, or
which is also an interesting thought when you talk through light being hidden by something. So something external being introduced. External being introduced to the light to cover it later. So that's an interesting thought too, of what we add to our lives to affect the saltiness and the light.
Yeah. So all that said, it seems to me like whenever we're saying like, what is Jesus getting at? I think it's best understood whenever we see these two as a couplet, rather than like saying that salt means one thing and light means another. It seems like they're both intended to mean the same thing.
Yeah.
And so I think it's beneficial for us to look at them together.
Yeah.
Which is super cool because, like, whenever you're saying it like that they're a parallel of one another, that they mean the same thing. It's so neat and just how cool. Like, if you didn't get the first time, I'm going to repeat myself and just use a different metaphor.
Yeah. One of the reasons it's the best sermon ever, because why would we think to compare salt and light?
Yeah. And so we should be asking, what's the thing they have in common?
Yeah.
I just think that's such a good teacher move too, right? I remember my dad teaching me, like, growing up, that like one of the most important things as a teacher is to be able to take a concept and explain it from multiple angles, because you have different learning styles. People are going to latch onto one metaphor better than another. Yeah. So Jesus is not teaching multiple points here. He's teaching one. Yeah. And let's see. I do think one other thing that I found interesting is we talked about salt. And I think this will come out even more with the light. But one of the things that struck me as I was reading was that, like, salt, it is applied to food to make it, like, tasty, right? To season it, to make it more palatable and enjoyable. Yeah. And it is separate from the food that it's seasoning, but it has to be combined with it. And so if you have a steak and you put something on it that just tastes like steak, then it doesn't enhance it. Right. Like, you want to be putting salt on it, and it's separate from it, but it enhances the flavor. And so I think, like, in that way, we should be thinking that salt is something that stands out.
Yeah, that's very cool. And again, the salt doesn't try to make a steak taste like salt.
Mm-hmm.
The salt also helps enhance the flavor of the steak as well. Medium
Now you
rare.
just want a steak.
I know. I'm
Medium
thinking of
rare all day
medium rare.
long, guys. We didn't even have to ask that as an
Yeah.
icebreaker
That's the first time all three of us have agreed on something wholeheartedly.
on anything ever.
Medium rare steak.
Trying the three-way high five, and they both just offered one hand
Oh.
to me and didn't try to. There we go. There we go. Nailed it.
Yeah.
Nailed it. Yeah, cut that to be flawless.
So you want to talk
and-
about 14 through 16 then?
Yeah. But so if salt's lost its taste, it's not even worth the garbage can. You just throw it in the street. You're not
In
even
Luke,
gonna
he
take
talks about it's like it's not worth throwing on the dirt or the manure pile, which is an interesting. Like I don't exactly understand the context in Luke, and actually I read commentators who were like, "Yeah, we don't really know what he's talking about."
Yeah, it's not good.
Yeah, it's not good.
not good.
Either way.
Yeah, you're the
salt in
light of the
manure
world.
pile.
You're right.
You're
You're the
in a bad
light of the
spot.
world. City set on a hill cannot be hidden.
Yep. Okay, so here one of the things that I was doing is like you have light of the world, city on a hill. That's again like actually two different images, right? A light like a torch or a lamp, and then a city.
Yeah.
So Jesus kind of uses three different metaphors in here: salt, light, salt, a lamp, and a city. But this lamp and city are definitely like linked because a city on a hill, the thing that they would probably imagine is like a city at night that has all the torches lit up and everything. You're wandering aimlessly out there, and all of a sudden you can't figure out where you're at. You look up and you see a city with just torches blazing and stuff, and you know which direction to head.
Yeah, and they would think of Jerusalem more often than not because Jerusalem is literally a city built into a hill.
Yeah, and Isaiah references it in that way a lot of times, speaking of Zion or Jerusalem being a city on a hill.
We should have found a list of all the names Jerusalem's been called. It was Salem.
Oh, yeah.
And Zion and others,
And there's our list,
Again,
guys.
should have found a list.
etc. So Ephesians 5:8, Paul tells the Ephesians, "For at one time you were darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of the light."
Mm-hmm.
And there in Isaiah 9:2, the people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in a land of deep darkness, on them has light shone. And John starts his gospel talking about the light of the world.
Yeah.
And because Jesus is light, he has made us light.
I was just going to say light in the Old Testament symbolizes many overlapping ideas such as revelation, instruction, the law, righteousness, and God's presence. And so whenever we're putting this into like perspective here for us as well, like just how like how good that is for us is like to see. I don't know where I'm going there.
No, you're spot on. Yeah, I mean, so like that illumination stuff. I just think of like your word being a lamp unto my feet and a light into my path, and that like just allowing us to see, what's right and what God's will is, and where we should be going, and just I think even just without going too deep into the metaphor, it's like, have you ever been someplace that it was so dark? You went spelunking or something like that,
I don't
and
know
then
what that means.
cave diving.
Okay, thank you.
And it's like, a light helps so much, especially for those of us who are claustrophobic.
Yeah.
Like having a light just makes it a lot
If you've
better.
never been caving, you got to go and have the guy turn the flashlight off because you've never experienced darkness like that.
No, thank you.
I hate it.
Thank you.
It was amazing.
But like just the more we've been talking about this, the more I'm like, man, that's so cool. Like you can't hide light. Like,
Right.
I mean, yes, you can like put it over like a basket and stuff like that. But if you're in a pitch dark room and there's a light that is all the way across, you're going to see that light shining brightly. Yeah. Like it's going to look far away, but it's still there and you can see it.
Right.
And it's just neat.
And so the only way you miss it is if it gets hidden.
Right.
If you put it under a bushel.
It really makes me think of the sermon Michael preached long ago. Like, I can't even remember how long it was when all of the lights got shut off in the worship center and he hid.
We were teaching 1 John, weren't we?
Oh, I don't remember.
Yeah,
I
think so.
honestly don't, but it was so impactful of like how bright the light can be whenever it's just like a little light. It was so dark in that room and just like a little light came on and you can't hide from it. It was just neat.
It's cool. Jay's out in the woods on this one.
Yeah, I wasn't here yet.
It's okay.
It's okay. It was a good sermon.
So so you're the salt of the earth, how that's still being used today. A city set on a hill, it's still being used, but it's been co-opted by politicians over the years.
I always think of that song, but I don't know it.
I'm a city set on a hill.
I always think of that song, but I don't know it.
Right. It's fine. I only know a city on a hill, and that's it.
I just sang it.
No, it's like Christian, not country.
Jesus made me a city set on a hill.
Now it's Christian.
Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket. It's cool. Did a search for what those kind of lamps would have looked like, and so picture a working class genie's lamp. So with the handle, with the base, with the spout. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, picking the chalice, picking the cup of Christ. It wasn't this grand king's cup; it was the cup of a carpenter, a little clay cup.
Chosen wisely.
Yeah, and so it's the same idea, kind of a low rent genie lamp, and the oil would be in it, in the base, like a almost like a teapot looking thing, and then there'd be a wick or something at the top, and it would burn that way.
So this like light a lamp and then hide it seems to be doing the same thing for me as like salt lose its taste, right? It's that same kind of like, that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Blow the lamp out if you want to be dark.
Right. Why would you light it and then put it under a bushel?
Yeah.
Right. Or under a basket. It would catch on fire. Is a bushel a basket?
Yeah.
No.
A bushel's a basket.
No. I thought it was like a bush.
I often pick bushes of apples.
I see why you would think that, because it sounds a lot like it.
It's an Italian bush? Yeah, bushel.
Bushel. This is
I'm
ridiculous.
done today, guys.
No, keep going.
This is one of those landmark episodes.
No, I always thought it was like, the fake little tree, like bush that had like the emptiness and then, covering it up.
No.
I'm flabbergasted. No. That's not the right word. I don't even know.
Befuddled.
That's a good one. I'm befuddled because we've been bamboozled.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what I see. So
It's a basket.
it is.
Yeah. So when you
Particular
go
size basket.
Yeah, you go pick apples. A bushel
in a peck.
Yeah,
Yes.
I love you. A bushel, which is an amount. Volume. I can't even.
People probably already understand this. We can go on.
Let's
sorry.
move on.
All right.
Okay, so then we hit 14 and 15 is where we've got this second analogy, or the second and third analogy. And then, so I think verse 16 is where we get the explanation of both of them, right?
Ooh, good.
He says, in the same way, so we should see that for him saying like, okay, let me go ahead and make the analogy for you.
Yeah.
So I just gave two or three pictures.
Yeah, because the disciples ask him time after time in the future, what in the world did you mean by that?
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
He says, in the same way, let your light shine before others. That's the imperative here that we're supposed to get from both these. So let your salt be salty to others. Let your light shine before others.
So that
they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven.
Yeah, so both the salt and the light metaphors communicate like the same idea that they are supposed to be going out and showing people the new covenant and the new, like, who Jesus is.
Yeah, and I think that's especially like tied into that. You're blessed whenever you are persecuted for my name's sake. Yeah. So there would be a temptation, like after Jesus is gone, like what we see is that all over the place persecution breaks out and people are being killed and burned at the stake and everything. And so there'd be a temptation to think like, man, what if Jesus just wanted us to lay low until he comes back? And this like precludes that possibility.
Right.
It's like, you can't lay low. Like, you need to be out there. You need to be salty, and you need to be a city on a hill.
Oh man. So at Pentecost, the Holy Spirit lights like tongues of fire. So
And there's no bushels.
There are no bushels. Their lamps have been lit by the Holy Spirit. And so he's telling them, yeah, your lights are lit. Don't hide it. Go show it.
like,
oh man, go be salt.
get lit.
Man, oh man.
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
And then, so I think that last phrase, give glory to your Father who is in heaven, so that people may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. That does, it's like setting up that whenever good works are appropriately put on display. So, I mean, at the beginning of chapter 6, he talks about what happens whenever you do it with a self-serving attitude.
Yeah.
He's like, you got to do that in secret because you can't be doing it for people's praise. But here he's saying, like, whenever you're doing it in the right way, choosing not to hide the light, people see it and they give glory to God, which is always a tension for Christians, right? Because we're like, we should not, be broadcasting every good deed we do. But also this would cause us to say, like, we shouldn't be ashamed of it or trying to hide it either. We should do it in such a way that people can see it. And glorify God.
That's cool. You start doing it now, and then we'll talk about later how to do it better.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Anything else? 13 through 16? She shakes her head no. Let's see. You guys trust her?
Yep.
Let's see.
Let's go.
17 through 20. Do not think that I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I've not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven.
Woo!
Man, Jesus did not come to abolish the law. He didn't come to loosen it. He didn't come to untie it. He didn't come to demolish it. Other places where it's talked about in the Bible, it's usually thrown down or destroy. That word is, it's pretty strong.
Yeah. I think this is really important. So we've talked before, I don't remember if we've talked about it on the podcast, that like there was an early church heresy called Marcionism, where there's a guy who basically said, hey, I like Jesus and the things he teaches, but that Old Testament stuff, like he did away with that. We've got the new covenant now. We don't need the old covenant. So go ahead and rip out your Old Testaments, and all we need is the New Testament. And that's like a major problem for us to think that we should just not study the Old Testament. And this is one of the main verses that like helps us understand why. That Jesus did not come to get rid of the law or the prophets, which I guess we should just say that's to them was synonymous with the Tanakh, the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. So he didn't come to do away with it. He came to fulfill it. So he's not saying stop reading it. He's saying start reading it with me in mind.
Ooh, yeah.
Another thing with the word abolish, the verb is frequently employed when discussing the temple. So we see that in Matthew 24:2, 26:61, 27:40. In contrast to the law, Jesus declares concerning the temple, not one stone will remain upon another, and all will be thrown down. The Common English Bible provides an even more vivid description. Everything will be completely destroyed. Jesus affirms that such destruction was not his intention to relation to the law. So just kind of backing up what you were just saying right now, like, he is not sitting here to throw it all out. He's saying, like, no, I'm here to fulfill it. So repeat.
Which I think as Matthew's writing this, like, that's got to be huge because, again, he's writing to a Jewish audience that would be thinking, like, hang on, if we believe this Jesus guy, does that mean we toss everything else that we've believed our entire lives out? And that Matthew would be showing that what Jesus said is absolutely not. I didn't come to get rid of it. I came to fulfill it. Like, it all pointed to me. It's actually like we see it in its fullest form. We only rightly understand everything that you've based your life on. We only rightly understand it whenever we understand Jesus.
And Matthew's definitely laying the foundation, the framework for him to be the fulfillment. In the past 4 chapters, he's already talked the word fulfill, what the prophets has spoken, has been already said in Matthew 1:22 through 23, Matthew 2:5-6, 15, verse 17, 18, 23. Like,
all
he
over
is,
the place.
he is making sure, like, we know, like, hey, he's the fulfillment. He is fulfilled.
Yeah, one of the cool other definitions of the word used as fulfill here is to level up. And for anybody who's a gamer out there, I really thought that was a very cool option as well. To level, he didn't come to abolish the law, but to level it up.
Yeah, so I wonder, I kind of see like two different ways. We didn't really talk about this. It seems like fulfill means partially that he abides by everything that was spoken by the law and the prophets. So Jesus is perfect, like not one step outside of what God declared in his revealed will in the Old Testament. So that would be fulfill it, like in the way that theoretically we were supposed to fulfill it, but couldn't
be
because of
perfect
sin.
As your heavenly Father.
Yeah. So he fulfilled it in that way, like that he was perfect. And then also like more, I've heard people say this as like to fill full. So if you got this container of the Old Testament, the law and the prophets, and Jesus fills it up, like it's it was the shadow of what was to come, and Jesus like is the reality.
Oh man. Ooh, so as each of us fulfills part of the law that we've been able to fulfill, we're putting a little bit in the measuring cup, but Jesus is the one who could be the whole measure.
Yeah.
Oh man. Awesome. Is that 17? Good?
Yeah.
Hey, what about jots and tittles, Nathan?
Ooh.
Hold on. Can I do heaven and earth before
Do it.
so we keep it
Do it.
in? I just found that Matthew 24:34 through 35 says, "Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away." Just the contrast here, the comparison and the contrast of like, even for truly I say to you, and here it says for truly I say to you, and heaven and earth will pass away, but his word will not. So he's still standing very firm on his foundation of his word, which when we see throughout scripture, his word is even the law and prophets. It's not just the New Testament.
Everything else is going to melt away,
Yeah.
but Jesus is who remains.
Yeah.
Yeah. On that, just an unpopular opinion, I don't like red letter Bibles for that reason. So
Because it would all be red letter.
yeah. So it's like, I think people can accidentally just say like, well, yeah, it's all God's word, but the red letters, those are especially God's word. It's like, if we rightly understand the doctrine of the inspiration of scripture, then we treat the whole thing as inspired by God.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Which was done in his final discourse. Like this part, him saying this was in his final discourse. And then currently what he's talking about right now from the Sermon on the Mount is his first discourse. So I thought that was just cool. Like starting it with this and ending it with that. Okay.
And then heaven and earth, I mean, it's just, it's the way they talked about everything.
Yeah.
The entire, like all of it. So not an iota, not a dot. We didn't really nail this down. Like, so that's also been translated as jot and tittle.
Yeah, King James turned it into jot and tittle, two English punctuation marks.
Yeah. Okay, so those would have been old school English.
Yeah.
Names for old school English, whereas this would be going back to the Greek, correct?
Yeah. And so that's a fun talk too about Bible translation and how so dynamic equivalence is like the NIV taking what we traditionally would think of as thought for thought. This is kind of one of those instances, even in the King James, which people think as a quote unquote word for word translation. But here, a jot and tittle is an idea that English speakers back then would have understood and would have, okay, I got you.
So for us, it would be like it'd be like us saying a period or a dash.
Yeah.
Like
period, a dash. So, so the iota.
Those would be punctuation marks, whereas an iota is actually...
Yeah. You think of it like, the dot of an I or the cross of a T.
Yeah.
So, even, so the dot of an I, I mean, if you've forgotten an I on a...
I have.
As you're writing.
But a cross of a T, that'd make it an L.
That's important, sure.
I've done that whenever I've signed prayer cards. I end up like in my name, Nalhan, or I accidentally cross the H instead of the T.
I don't ever cross.
Nalton.
So
You don't cross it? You're
my T's?
on Stephanie?
Mm-mm.
Wow, Stephanie.
Huh, Slef.
Yep.
All right,
It's called
Slef.
Stephanie.
So so the
That's the worst name
tiniest...
I've been called. It's fine.
Yeah, I believe it.
So Jesus is saying that even the smallest punctuation marks in the law will not pass away until all is accomplished. Iota being the smallest of the Greek letters, It's the 8th letter of the Greek alphabet.
Fun fact.
Yeah, take that.
Trivia night.
And iota is the only place in the New Testament that it's used.
Wow.
And that makes it
Hapax legomenon.
yes.
I almost said it wrong, so I'm glad you said it. But that's
And then the dot word there is like when a Hebrew letter would go up into a horn, like a T, or what else would have a horn in English?
I mean, would you
like
have
a V,
the top
maybe,
of an A or something?
Top of an H?
Yeah.
Or
okay.
or lowercase a, how that might, like the little horn mark. So in Hebrew, those horn marks were super important, but they were pretty minuscule.
Okay, just a fun conversation here for a second. Is he being literal with that, or is he using hyperbolic language?
Yeah, I think it's even the smallest, what you think is the most insignificant part of the law. It's not going to pass away until all is accomplished.
Yeah,
but and on the flip side, that he's fulfilled even what you would think is the tiniest part.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just curious because it's like whenever we think about, even the doctrine of inerrancy. Whenever we talk about inerrancy, we talk about in the original manuscripts that there is nothing that was contradictory to fact, and there were even like potentially grammatical errors then, because like we're not saying that like God used imperfect people, and then you have transmission errors as well since then, or transcription errors that it's like, I mean, we could be missing some periods and whatnot.
I think we have one here because salt losing its taste. Some translators have talked about foolishness, and that I think one of the things I read was that goes back to like two words being really close in their spelling, and somebody may have
made an error.
Yeah, made an error in that. So yeah, that's even evident in our study of this.
Right. So he's not saying that there's never ever going to be a transmission error, or that a scribe's never going to have, going to forget a period.
Yeah.
So he's talking more like not or hyperbolically, I guess.
Yeah. Crude, but letter of the law versus spirit of the law.
Yeah.
Not that the letter of the law is different, but
right. I get what you're saying though. Okay. Anyway, I just thought that was he's not just talking about the actual punctuation marks and that it's going to have perfect transcription from here until kingdom come.
Yeah. And those few scribes over the years who messed up.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're not damned because of it.
Right. So if you were a scribe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Again, so I mean, I just got to teach on the authority of Scripture, and I did.
It was real good.
Oh, you guys are sweet.
Well,
you weren't sweet. You said that. You acknowledged. You're like, that is a true fact.
You did it.
So thanks for the affirmation of reality.
Oh no. Oh yes, you were present that day.
You did talk. But like this would be one that I'd pull from and say like, hey, we establish first the authority of the Gospels because it's like easier to verify historically, and then we look at what Jesus had to say about the Old Testament, and this would be one of those places. Same thing, like whenever he says that my word will not pass away.
Yeah.
So anyway,
oh man, that's good.
I'm going to move on.
So good.
19.
Yeah.
Whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments. So that's kind of back up there. If you relax an iota or a dot, right?
Yeah, so that would have more to do with like the intentional changing of it. So it might not even be like accidental, but it would be like one of those, don't you dare change this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Relaxes meaning loosens. Oh, that's the one that comes in back. Loosen or untie. So yeah, you're relaxing this thing, and Jesus is answering those people who thought he came to abolish. Yeah, I'm not even here to let up a little bit.
Yeah, which I mean, you end up with people like the Pharisees saying like, "Who is this guy? He's a glutton, and like he's hanging out with tax collectors and sinners and stuff." And so they would be saying he's definitely letting up. He's relaxing the commandments.
Yeah,
but he was not.
Yeah, right. What seems like this just antithesis of what he's saying, of what he's doing. But here we see, no, it's all the same.
Yeah.
Man, oh man. Heck of a guy, that Jesus.
Yeah. And you see, like, whenever you read, like, the way he handles the Sabbath and stuff, it's tempting to think, like, well, he's relaxing the law with that. And I think what ends up happening is that you have, he understands better than anybody else what was actually being taught in the law, like what the heart of the law was.
Yeah.
And so he goes after that heart, whereas they created traditions around the part that actually wasn't the main point.
Yeah. And when he was accused, when he'd heal somebody on the Sabbath, he was accused of breaking the Sabbath, where that was part of the things that the Pharisees and the Sadducees would have added
Right.
to the law.
Right. Yeah. He was breaking their traditions, but not the actual Torah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What else? Verse 19.
Yeah, so the least in the kingdom of heaven is not a reference to ranking in the kingdom or getting in by the skin of one's teeth, but rather it is poetically a parallel way of saying that one does not get in.
Yeah. So,
You're doing a weird space.
and you're getting that because of verse 20. So,
Yes.
Unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. So it's not just like,
Verse 20 makes it more clear.
so she's saying that in verse 19 where he says, if you teach this way, you'll be called the least in the kingdom. He's not saying you make it in, you just don't get a great spot at the table.
Right. There's not like a ranking up in heaven that says like, you're here, you're here, you're here. Right?
I mean, there are degrees of reward and stuff.
Right. But it's not like a rank system.
Yeah. I don't know how you
Never mind.
differentiate that. I just think like, so especially with the parallel in verse 20, you're saying that like in both instances, he's saying that you're not making it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you disagree with that, Jay? Least in the kingdom versus never enter the kingdom. Is that two different statuses of people, or is it saying the same thing?
Man. Yeah, you will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. It looks like you're still there, right? Yeah, I must have totally zoned out when you
Said
read
that yesterday. But yesterday I did add in verse 20 whenever I said it. Today I did not, and I don't know why. I'm still caught on the...
Where is least in the kingdom of heaven in verse 20?
So
Unless your righteousness
It's saying
exceeds...
so the commentator I read said it's more or less like a poetic parallel to verse 20.
So that you'll never enter the kingdom of heaven. So more saying like, so this 4 at the beginning of 20 would say that like this verse 20 is expanding or explaining what he just said, right? That's how it's related. It's clauses that are related in a way that they either form the foundation or expand on what was just said.
Okay.
So if at first he says, hey, you better not relax it, instead you should teach everyone to command to keep it, and he talks about least and greatest, and then he says, for I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven.
Yes.
So that'd be saying like, you might have a statement up in verse 19 that's a less harsh way of saying it, but then in verse 20 he goes ahead and takes it to to the fullest extent.
So you'll be called least from the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah, potentially. I think that's what the author she was reading is saying.
I'm still looking up. Go ahead. I'm still looking up the whole ranking in heaven. So, like, I view rewards and rank different. Like, in status, almost. Like, you wouldn't have a higher status because you have more rewards.
Elders and overseers are judged differently than the rest of us.
And you do end up with Jesus saying, like, to the 12 that he's going to appoint them over cities and stuff like that. So there is, it's kind of mysterious. I mean, because you also have these others, the ones who do the law and teach them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven.
Right. So what if you don't teach the law and you just, the rest of your life, you do it faithfully?
Right. So anyway, I don't think that's his point
Right.
here.
No.
Yeah.
I don't think it's his point either. That's why I said, like, this doesn't have to do with our ranking within heaven or even thinking. I don't know. I'm just like sitting here thinking of a rank system, like 1 through 10, like
And even if
she's the greatest and then this person's the least.
even if it is, though, we won't feel envy. We won't feel jealousy. We'll all be totally fulfilled in
in Jesus, yeah.
his pleasure and his love for us.
I guess that's probably the difference is, though, if there was a rank system, right, we wouldn't know almost. Like, I don't...
Or just not care.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, that doesn't matter.
I mean,
sorry.
Is it Revelation that says that he'll wipe away every tear?
Yeah.
Nah. Maybe that's one of the tears that he's going to wipe away.
It seems to me like he's just establishing, like, what does, again, this is a kingdom manifesto, right? So what does the kingdom value? It values, like, a right teaching and doing of the law.
And are we talking, so when Matthew talks about the kingdom of heaven, is he only ever talking about the future kingdom that will be? Or are there any places where he's talking about the kingdom that's here on earth in Jesus' followers?
Yeah, it's an already and not yet. I mean, the mustard seed. So the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. It's the smallest, and then ends up growing, and so that would be talking about like the earthly spread of the gospel. Yeah.
So they could be called least
in the kingdom here, even. Yeah. Again, the main point he's getting at is like relaxing them is bad.
Yeah, don't do
and doing them and teaching others to do them is good.
Yeah, that's the main point.
I can remember that part.
Got it.
Yep.
Sorry, boss.
And then,
what else do you guys have?
Unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees. This was kind of a point that clicked for me. Is like I'd always just thought that he was talking about like, hey, do a better job keeping the law than them. But then I think with this phrase specifically introduces the next sections of his speech, which have to do with like, you've heard it said, like, don't commit murder. But I tell you, if you've hated your brother in your heart, you've committed murder already, and same thing with lust. And so he's not just saying like, do better at keeping the standards that you know, but also saying like, hey, the standards are higher than you even realize right now. So the Pharisees may be setting their bar at a certain place. They're actually relaxing the commandments. Even whenever you get to like him talking about, hey, you guys tithe all this other stuff, but you don't honor your father and mother, and so you're choosing to keep traditions while ignoring the actual heart of the law. So anyway,
good.
Yeah, don't do that either.
Good.
What else?
Sorry, I feel like I'm talking a lot.
But it's all good.
It is really good.
The last one for me would be, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, if you go like, especially to Jesus, and then he says, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. And I would have to say, Jay, does your righteousness exceed that of the scribes and Pharisees?
You want my real answer or what I should say to help with your point?
I want both.
No, because, I was behind a terrible driver this morning on the way to the church.
Exactly.
But on the same side, back to that Alistair Begg quote we talked about a few weeks ago. Man on the middle cross said I could come. His righteousness did, and his righteousness is mine.
Yep.
So yes.
Exactly. So for each of us, like every believer, everyone who actually makes it into the kingdom, we would have to say, my righteousness doesn't exceed that of the scribes and Pharisees, but Jesus does. Yeah. Jesus' righteousness does, and I trust in him, and therefore his righteousness is mine.
Yeah. And that last part is so difficult for us to wrap our heads around too, that we always say, we have a tendency, evangelicals, to say, I'm just a sinner saved by grace. And yet, because of Jesus' righteousness, I am righteous.
Yeah.
I feel like that was one of the things that I didn't understand until adulthood was like, I felt like I understood the doctrine of expiation or whatever, like that my sins have been cleansed and taken away. And so it's like, okay, so I'm no longer guilty. Yeah. But I did not understand imputation, that Christ's righteousness has been given to me.
Yeah, there's a big difference between being found not guilty and being seen as righteous.
Yes. And so like that totally changes the way you think about obedience and the way God thinks about you and stuff. Because if it's just forgiveness, then it's like, okay, God thinks of me as neutral and like, don't screw it up again.
Yeah.
If instead you understand imputation, you realize that he looks at you and he's just as pleased with you as he is with his son, Jesus, which is like, sounds like that too good to be true, or like presumptuous, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And Jesus' righteousness makes us righteous. And when we blow it and sin, he comes right next to us because his heart is for us. And he's still making us righteous.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I'm just sitting here like, man, I am constantly always learning and being refined. And I love it.
Me too.
Ditto. Well, I think that's it. So what have we learned today?
A lot.
Salt your food.
Yep.
Jesus is good.
Don't put a bush over the lamp.
Don't put an Italian bush over your light. So here's to all you Italian bush owners out there. Thanks for joining us.
Come on.
And until next time, the warehouse is closed.
Yay! It happened. So say bye, Nathan.
Bye.
If the warehouse closes, it's
We can
done.
still say bye.
No. Parker, cut that part.